All right, good afternoon. I believe the recording has started. So thank you all for joining us today this afternoon. It's Tuesday, March 13th, and it's a sunny day out here in Des Moines. So we hope it's sunny where you are today. My name is Dave Parzial. I'm a program officer with the state office, and I'll let my colleague introduce herself as well.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Jancy LaFollette with the CNCS State Office. Dave and I will be co-presenting the continuation webinar today. So thank you for joining us. I'm looking forward to seeing if you guys have any questions and kind of going through this material today to make sure we're all on the same page. Back to you, Dave.
Awesome. Thanks, Jancy. So on this slide, we've pulled up our agenda for the call today. Pretty straightforward. We're going to start out taking just a look at the overall application process and a quick review of that. Then we're going to take a little bit of a closer look at the different sections of the application and some updated guidance specific to those sections. And then we'll have some time for some general Q&A at the end of the call as well. So this again is a general technical assistance webinar. If you have some more project-specific questions, we encourage that you reach out after our call today directly with your program officer, and we can set up a time to further review any real specific project questions. If they're fiscal questions, we're happy to help navigate that and get you connected with our grants officer, Lynette White, to get clarifications on any fiscal questions you might have. So again, we'll get started with a quick review of the application process. So on this next slide here, you'll see our basic timeline is outlined. As a reminder, the NOFOs for the continuation applications opened back in February. Shortly after, continuation notification letters were sent out to all of you, and included in those letters you'll find links to the grant application instructions, performance measure instructions, the aggregate funding form, which is an attachment for your continuation application, and e-grants instructions. Also included on those letters is your fiscal year 18 baseline funding level for your annual federal funding. As you'll see, the NOFO is scheduled to close on April 9th, and that is also the due date in eGrants for submitting your continuation application. When you're getting your application started in eGrants, you'll want to ensure you select the correct NOFO. For all of you that are continuing for FGP and SCP, you'll want to select the NOFO that has FY 2018 FGP quarter 4 for year 2 and 3, or for SCP it says FY 2018 SCP quarter 4. So when you're selecting from that big drop-down menu, just a good practice to double check, make sure you've got the right NOFO for your program, and quarter 4 is for all of our grants that are starting July 1st. Your budget period is that 1 year budget period, annual period that's coming up. It's July 1st, 2018 through 6/30/2019. But as a reminder, your project period, so on your application where you enter your overall project period, is that 3-year grant cycle. So for those of you entering year 2, that is July 1st, 2017 through 6/30/2020. For those of you entering year 3, and the final year of your grant cycle, those are July 1st, 2016 through June 30th, 2019. On each of your invitation letters, your annual federal funding level is unique by your program, and your VSYs vary by program as well. So we encourage folks, take a look at those, make sure the numbers included on your letter match with your records. If you have any questions or run into a question about those, please contact your program officer after our call, and we'll be happy to walk through that with you. So as you're getting your application started, as a reminder, if you haven't already started your continuation application, you can go to your eGrants homepage, click continuation/renewal, and then click Continue next to the application that you plan to update. You'll want to be sure you select the correct application in that list. It's probably the most recent continuation or amendment that's in that list that you'll be continuing. Again, then you'll select that NOFO that applies to your program, and after you've clicked the NOFO and moved forward in eGrants, it's going to create your continue application, which will include a copy of all the information from your previously awarded application. So it carries it forward so that you don't have to rewrite your application or re-enter all the information. You'll just be able to go in section by section and make those necessary edits to update any information that might be out of date or that you'd like to expand or strengthen. So you'll be able to go in and edit each of those sections as needed. Whoops, I jumped ahead there. When you've completed your edits or updates to your application, you're going to want to have your organization's authorized representative log in through their eGrants account and have them complete the assurances, certifications, and then complete the submission of the grant. By them clicking the submit button, it's essentially the equivalent of them signing off on the grant application. So that's why it's really important that the authorized representative does that in their own eGrants account. That process will tag it based upon the username of that eGrants account. We've got a couple recommendations for folks, and a lot of this might look familiar as if this is if you're as a seasoned project director, this isn't your first time through this, but as a reminder, we encourage folks to complete and save all your work in a Word document first and then copy paste it into eGrants. We know eGrants can be temperamental, and we know you put a lot of time and effort into your work. So that's a great way, just in case you run into a glitch, to make sure your work is saved and can easily be copy pasted back in when you get back into eGrants. As a reminder, eGrants doesn't have a spelling or grammar check, so we encourage folks to take a look through before submitting the application after you've made your updates and just ensure everything looks good. A helpful option would be to pull it out as a PDF and print the application to review it before submitting it. One way you can do that is when you're going to enter into the application, before you click the edit button to open the application up, there's that drop down menu that you can choose application for federal assistance from that and click go, and that'll pull a PDF of what you've entered so far of your face sheet, your narratives, and your work plans. From that drop down menu, you can also click your budget narrative and pull that out as well before you submit it. Alternatively, if you're already in the application, you can go to the Review tab and you can pull PDFs of both the application for federal assistance and the budget from there as well. So we encourage take a look at that. Make sure you feel like everything copy pasted correctly. We appreciate that. And if you have any questions about how to do that, feel free to reach out to your program officer and we'll help walk you through the steps. eGrants doesn't take any special formatting, so as you're making those adjustments in Word, please don't use tables, graphs, or bold or italics, because unfortunately it won't copy paste into eGrants. And as you all know, eGrants works best with Internet Explorer. So if you're running into a glitch or something's not opening or saving correctly, please double check if you've got Chrome or Firefox open. We recommend trying to do everything in the application through Internet Explorer, as that does work best with the system. And another troubleshooting tip is if you're running into an issue in Internet Explorer, please check your pop-up blocker. We know sometimes that can prevent things from advancing in the system, so you might want to turn off pop-ups, top up your pop-up blocker for eGrants while you're working on the application. It's important that everybody, your colleagues, your fellow fiscal colleagues, and your agency leadership who are serving as your authorized representative have individual separate eGrants accounts for each user. If you've had recent staff changes at your organization, maybe a new project director, new accounting staff, a new executive director, it's really important that those individuals create new eGrants accounts. Please don't rename old eGrants accounts. Unfortunately, the system then would be renaming the history of that user. So if that was a longtime project director of the last 10 years, and you rename them to your name, it'll make it look like you've been the project director for the last 10 years historically in the grant records. So please create new accounts. If you find yourself in the situation where your agency's recently had that change, I recommend getting started in that process now, so when it comes time to submit the application, everybody's accounts are set up and are linked to your grant profile so that you have no delay in getting that submitted. If you do run into technical issues while you're working on the continuation application, please let us know. But for best assistance, we encourage folks to contact the National Service Hotline. Unfortunately, Jancy, Vicky, and I have limited access from a technical standpoint to be able to provide assistance. And so the hotline can best provide that back-end technical assistance if you're running into an error. You can call them at the hotline number, or on our website, there's a web form at questions.nationalservice.gov. And you can fill that form out. It'll send an email to help get a ticket started. You can even CC Jancy, Vicky, or I, for your program officer, through that process to keep us in the loop. We encourage getting started with the application sooner than later. Please don't wait till the week it's due to get started on next steps. We know the system gets very busy when we get close to deadlines. I think that might cause a couple extra glitches as the system gets bogged down. So starting sooner will help you stay outside of that and hopefully have less issues pop up. And if we're getting close to that deadline and you do run into a tech issue, please don't hesitate to contact the National Service Hotline. It's important to get a ticket opened before the due date and to let us know about that, and we'll work with you to help make sure that gets solved and then your application gets submitted. So please keep those in mind as you're working through next steps. And I'm going to hand it over to Jancy, and we're going to take a closer look at the application instructions around each of the sections of the application.
Great, thanks, Dave. So before we kind of move into the general review of the application instructions, are there any questions about the application process that Dave talked about? So again, this is some high-level things that you guys are like, yeah, we know these things, but we just want to make sure that you guys are aware. Nice reminders, e-grants is temperamental. I knew you all don't know that already, but just how to work within that and making sure everyone's on the same page. You'll note that the applications are due a little earlier this year than they have been done in previous years, so we just want to make sure that everyone's on the same page. Any questions about the application process itself before we kind of dive into the application instruction sections? All right, I'm not seeing any in the chat functionality. I haven't heard anybody pipe up on the phone. We will break for questions throughout today's presentation, so if you guys do have anything, please feel free to chime in at any point. Again, the chat functionality or the conversation box is a great way to ask those questions as well. Dave and I are both monitoring that as we go through this. So we'll start with a review of the application instructions. So application instructions for our foster grandparent and senior companion programs are available on our Managing Senior Corps website. We do encourage folks to print off the Senior Corps grant application. These application instructions are only about 68 pages, so you might not want to print them off, but actually refer back to them. This is in addition to your invitation to apply. So you all received a notice from our office which included an invitation to apply and then also links to our application instructions. I do encourage folks to make sure you read through the application instructions thoroughly as you go through each of these sections. So as Dave noted earlier, with the continuation request, this is your 2 and 3. So all of your information that is currently in the system will roll forward once you create that continuation application request. So the things you're going to notice here, we're going to walk through these sections and we're just going to point out a few things to highlight. So the applicant information, the application information, and the funding demographics, this section is really things to update if there's been significant changes at your project or your organization. So basically the project director has changed or a different point of contact has changed. That's really where you're going to update this information at. Please do not, and I will repeat this, do not update the geographic area served. unless this has been discussed and approved by CNCS. I know in the past there have been people who are like, oh, we're not really serving this county anymore, so we're just going to take them off our grant, or, oh, we'd like to move over here, so we're just going to. That is not allowable. I want to be very, very clear about that. So unless those changes have been approved by CNCS headquarters, you do not make any changes to your geographic area served. So applicant information, again, update as needed. Into the narrative section, so the narratives, again, updated as needed. Everything will roll forward. We do want to make sure that you guys have reviewed your narratives, making sure that they reflect your agency's expectations for the grant in year 2 and 3. Again, any changes that you make sure they do not exceed the 15-page requirement that was part of the NOFA, including the executive summary. So we just want to make sure that folks are still meeting the requirements of the grant if they are doing any updates. Some common updates that we see in the narrative, if the sponsor has changed anything within staffing or organizational changes, those are some big things. If anything needs to be updated within the work plans, making sure we're reflecting those in the narratives as well. So the narratives, the executive summary should be reviewed and updated to reflect any changes in the work plans. All the other narratives should be updated if information is no longer accurate due to the project and sponsor organization changes. And then if the narrative information is accurate, just leave it unchanged in the continuation application. So again, as Dave said, you'll want to print this off, review it, or look at it in a PDF form. That's actually how we look at things. So if you're ever in eGrants, we actually don't look at each section in eGrants. We print it off in a PDF. And so reviewing it in the PDF format will give you an insight into kind of how we will see your grant application. So application information, applicant information, and then the funding demographics and the narratives, basically update as needed, review them, make sure they're accurate, and other than that, moving forward. So the next screen, we're going to talk about work plans and performance measures. Just a reminder, work plan targets, those are annual targets that you are anticipating that you guys will reach in your final year, 3rd year of your project plan. So again, all your information is going to move forward. That information will copy and paste forward, and making sure that your work plans are designed and aligned with that 3-year performance period. Again, update the work plans as needed to reflect any upcoming performance period or continuation applications. We do not anticipate any significant changes here. So if you guys are doing some big changes, please make sure that you run those by your program officer first. For instance, if you're adjusting numbers of those clientele served, making sure you adjust those. If in the previous PPRs you've reported your targets have been, oh, we're going to serve 10 students and we've been consecutively serving 500 students, you might want to look at updating your work plans to make sure that you're kind of meeting or in line with what you're actually producing. If it goes the other way, you want to, if you've said we're going to serve 500 students, but we're actually only been serving 10, make sure you're working with your program officer to make sure that they understand why those changes are happening and what they will see. Typically, we will ask for that in writing, so we will want to see what changes you're requesting in writing ahead of time. So just keep that in mind. But again, any changes that you make do still need to meet the national FGP and SCP performance measurement requirements. So if you do make any changes, make sure you're still staying within those measure requirements as you move forward. The next slide that we talk about is just a work plan refresher for folks. So basically, your continuation application is something we want you guys to look at. We want to make sure it makes sense. We want to make sure that every information is accurate. These 2 sections, your service activity description as well as your instrument descriptions, are an area that are typically lacking in detail when we review any application. And so we just wanted to put a little refresher out there for folks, making sure that folks understand what should be included in those 2 sections of your work plans. Again, this is all lined out in the application instructions, so if you guys do have questions about where this came from, it is actually in the application instructions, and so you can refer to those. But basically, in your service activity description, you want to make sure that you are describing who the beneficiaries are, include what the volunteers will be doing with the beneficiaries, so i.e. the types of activities they'll be doing. You'll want to include how often and how long they're going to be doing those activities with the clients or the beneficiaries, so looking at dosage of that, and then say where the service activities will take place. And so again, these service activity descriptions, really you want to make sure they're including who beneficiaries are, what's going to be done, what type of activities they're going to be doing, dosage, and then where those service activities will be taking place. In addition to service activity descriptions, you're also going to have to measure these, obviously, and so we want to make sure your measurement or your instrument description is accurately reflecting how you're going to be measuring these service activities. And so you're going to identify the name of the tool. You're going to describe who will collect the data and from whom are they collecting the data, and then say when the data will be collected and how often. So these, again, are pieces that are typically missing from our work plans. If you look at your work plans and you're like, Jancy, it carried forward and it doesn't have these details, we still want to see these in here. Sometimes in year one, this doesn't it doesn't make us send it back for negotiation pieces, but we will be looking at these things moving forward as we align. We're trying to align with the theory of change as you guys move forward, and so this is really the detail that we're looking for. So again, making sure those instrument descriptions, identifying the tool of the name, the name of the tool, I can talk today, the collection of who will be collecting data and from whom, and then how often the data will be collected. So how, when, and how often. So just making sure that those are included in that. That will set us up for success to move forward. I'm going to turn it back over to Dave to really kind of dive into the performance measurement requirements a little bit. So he's taking a little deeper dive. Any questions so far about what we've discussed? Just looking at the first pieces of the narratives and the applicant information and just work plan overviews. Any questions so far? All right, Dave, it is yours.
All right, awesome. Well, thanks for walking us through that, Jancy. So I'm going to take a little bit of a closer look at the performance measure requirements for both FGP and SCP. And this should look pretty familiar since many of you recently in the past year or 2 years have gone through your renewal when these new expectations came out nationally. But just to refresh those, we're going to take a little bit of a closer look. And then we're also going to take a look at an example as just a reminder of how do we apply this rule to our program, how are these numbers calculated, and what does it really mean. So to recap, performance measures are the means by which sponsors such as you can demonstrate the tangible outcomes and results of the volunteer service in the community and the impact of your programs. They help tell us the what, the how, and the proof of the work that you do. And so for each of these programs, we're going to take a closer look. For FGP, as a reminder, for foster grandparent, your primary focus area for your work plans are going to be under education. And so looking at that, all of our applications must include the work plans that meet these following requirements, minimum requirements for FGP. So for every $6,000 in your annual baseline federal funding level, you need at least one volunteer service year worth of service placed in work plans that result in either national performance measure outcomes in the education focus area or national performance outputs and inclusion of people with disabilities, which is H15, that output. But to note, that's only applicable to sponsors who have historically supported programming in this area. So if that's not something you've been doing for a very long time, that probably would not apply then to your program. You guys would fall into that first category. And as a reminder, one VSY is the equivalent of 1,044 hours. So when we're looking at this, we're not necessarily looking just at bodies of volunteers, but the equivalent of one VSY in service. I see a question popped up in the chat. So from Tricia, for year 3, we currently lost a volunteer that served in our faith-based K-12 setting. Should we remove that work plan from year 3? Beings will likely not meet the outcome unless we get another volunteer. Tricia, that's a great question to review with your program officer. For kind of project-specific work plan adjustments, would encourage setting up a time to kind of review the scenario with your program officer, talk through some options and what might be the best fit for any adjustments you might be looking at in your continuation. We understand changes happen at the local level, maybe changes with your stations, and those relationships might impact the number of individuals you're going to serve or volunteers you're engaging there. So that'd be a good thing to set up a time to talk with your PO and talk through potential options there. So let's take a look at how we calculate this. So you'll want to take that annual baseline funding. That's the amount included on your letter. You should be pretty familiar. It's been the same amount for a couple years here now. You'll take your annual federal funding level and divide that by $6,000. And that's going to give you the number of VSYs needed in outcomes or in that H15 output if you've historically worked in that area. So looking at an example, if you worked at Nonprofit Awesome, you'd be running a great FGP project. And let's say, for example, their program has $240,000 in federal funding, and they support 48 VSYs. So they have a federal funding rate of $5,000 per VSY. So when we take their baseline funding at $240,000, divide that by 6,000, we get 40 VSY needed in National Performance Measure Outcome Work Plans, or Output H15. So that's how you can apply that to identify what's the minimum threshold of VSY that I need to have in those National Performance Measure Requirement work plans, or otherwise outcome-based work plans. I see another question here from David. It's got a 3 p.m. that he can't get out of. Thanks. Looking forward to the recording so you can see the rest. Thanks for joining us, Dave. Good luck in your next meeting, and we'll send out the recording and the slides so you guys can review these at a later date as well. So thanks for giving us a heads up, David. All right, so that's a refresher of the overview for FGP. Let's take a quick look at SCP here. Primary focus area for Senior Companion Program is Healthy Futures, so each of your work plans will include that as the focus area. And these requirements, you'll notice, look pretty similar. $6,000 in annual baseline funding. For every $6,000, you have to have at least one volunteer service year worth of service placed in work plans that result in outcome-based measures in the Healthy Future focus area, or outputs with inclusion of people with disabilities. That's output H15. But again, just like FGP, this is only applicable to sponsors who have historically supported programming in that area. So if that applies to your program, you've been doing this for quite some time. Otherwise, the first bullet is what applies to your program in an outcome-based work plan. And we're going to look at another example of how to calculate this for SCP. So in our example, hey, look, it's Nonprofit Awesome again. They must have FGP and SCP. For SCP, they've got a grant of $330,000, and they support 55 VSYs. So their program is at the maximum level of funding at that $6,000 threshold for their federal funding rate. And so it's interesting to note here, when you look at a program that's at the maximum funding level and you apply the National Performance Measure requirement, so you take the $330,000 divided by 6,000 and you get 55 VSYs that need to be in National Performance Measure outcomes, or in that output H15 if they've been historically programming in that area. So basically, since they're at the highest funding rate, they have to have all of their volunteers and all of their hours supporting outcome-based work plans. So good to compare those two to see a little bit how this might apply differently to your program based upon your funding level and how many VSYs you're supporting and whether or not you're at that full $6,000 rate. Before we jump into taking a look at the next couple sections in the application, do folks have any questions about those specific performance measure requirements or those examples that we just walked through? All right, great. Well, I don't see any questions in the chat, so we're going to go ahead and move on. And if questions come up later, we'll have some more time at the end of the call. So, Jancy, take it away with our next section.
Thanks, Dave. So we're going to look in this section, I'm going to discuss the budget, station rosters, and required documents and attachments on this screen. So we're going to start with the budget. Budget basically needs to be updated for the upcoming year. You're going to incorporate any changes, such as new sources of non-federal funds, adjustments in recognition, or personnel changes. The non-federal share must be the minimum 10%. Basically, 10% is the total grant funds, CNCS, or reminder that is 10% of the total grant funds, which includes CNCS and grantee share. I can read my own notes, I swear. And so for budgeting, making sure that our grantees are also budgeting for training. That's in the application instructions. The recommended amount is $1,000 for training. So make sure that you are including that in your budget and making sure that you are meeting the 10% minimum requirement for the non-federal share. Those are some just basic updates for budget. For the station rosters are updated directly in eGrants now. So that change happened a few years ago. You are going to go into eGrants directly and update your station rosters. Page 63 through 68 of your application instructions do provide an eGrant step-by-step instructions or visual instructions for this. So check those out. If you guys do have any questions, please refer back to the application instructions. It's probably the best way for you guys to look at that for updating those station rosters. The station rosters do need to be updated at least annually, so make sure that everything is accurate and in there as you submit those forward. So if you have any questions about that or running into any issues, please let your program officer know. Next is the required documents and attachments. So on page 49 through 51 of the grant application instructions, it gives you a table of what is due. And so when you look at that table, you're going to refer to the continuation column. So that table has like 3 different columns, but definitely refer to the continuation column. Basically, that'll walk you through what is required during the continuation process. So it might be a little different from year one or for year ones, but making sure that you are looking at the right column and submitting the correct information. Not everything needs to be resubmitted, but there are a few things that do need to be submitted to the office. Please note, documents still cannot be attached in eGrants, so these do need to have to be submitted outside of the eGrant system. Some of them are sent to the FFMC by mail, and then some are sent to the state office. We do prefer electronic copies at the state office just because we do have to download and submit those into eGrants. So if you do have an electronic copy of things, that is our preference. We still take mailed things. Attachments or documents that you are sending to us be emailed to us so we can then download those directly into eGrants on our end. So please let us know if you do have any questions about the budget, station rosters, or the attachments sections for the applications. Again, application instructions kind of outline these aspects, and so it should walk you through it, and it's pretty clear. Our next slide, we're going to talk about the authorizations, assurances, and certifications, as well as the CCR registration. So the authorization, assurances, and certifications. Basically, the person who electronically signs these 3 things, they click I agree, they must be the authorized to do so from your agency. So these are typically your authorized reps. Usually this person is not the project director. It's typically an executive director or a CEO or college president. The correct person must be logged into his or her own eGrants account before pressing I agree. So this is something I know many of you sit down with your authorized rep and go through with them in eGrants. Please make sure you are in their account, not your account, as you're clicking the agree button. We do also encourage folks to actually read what they're agreeing to. I know that sounds amazing, but this actually outlines the responsibilities of the sponsoring organization, which is your sponsor. They are the grantee of the federal funds, and so we want to make sure they fully understand what they're authorizing, what they're assuring, and what they're certifying for the grant. So just be mindful. These are federal funds, and we want to make sure that folks are aware of the sponsoring agency is taking these on. In addition, the CCR, many of you can remember when we actually had a separate CCR or a contractor registry that was required. It has now moved to SAM, or the System of Award Management. SAM is basically, it's sam.gov, and it's where all grant recipients are required to maintain a valid registration. This must be renewed annually, and you can go to sam.gov to actually register if you haven't. Most of you are registered. If you've received federal funds, you are registered. But based on your organization, depends on who actually updates this registration. So if this is the only, if your FGP or your SCP grant is the only grant that your agency is receiving, most likely you're going to have to remind someone to update this registry. If you are one of many federal funds that your agency receives, someone most likely does this on a regular basis. So you can actually log into sam.gov. You can see, or you can go onto sam.gov and actually see if you have an updated registry or not. The information was previously retained on the Central Contractor Registration, or CCR, basically got moved over to SAM a couple years ago. And so SAM is now where we are, where everything goes to. If you guys do have questions about this, please let us know. Please keep in mind, SAM registry is free. So a couple years ago there was some solicitation out there that they'll register you for only a great rate of $500 will get you your SAM registry. Yeah, it's a free registry, so you should not be paying anyone to register you on SAM. So just be aware of that. There are those things that go around every couple of years, so I want to make sure that folks understand that it is a free registry. It costs nothing to do it. You should not pay someone to register for you, so just be aware of that. And then finally, any specific grant questions that you guys have, you know, if we're looking to change our performance measurements, or we're looking to do this, you do want to make sure you contact your program officer. Keep in mind, no major changes can occur to your grant, so your primary focus areas, things like that, should not be changing. They shouldn't be changing anyways for foster grandparents and senior companions. But we want to make sure that you guys are sticking, typically no major changes are allowed during continuation applications. So if you do have any changes that you're interested in speaking with your program officer about, please make sure that you contact them. And you kind of walk through what those changes are. So as Dave said earlier, we do encourage you guys to start working on your continuation applications now and not on April 8th. So the system does, in my opinion, get a little bogged down as we get closer to the time. In addition, if you need to set up a time to speak with one of your with your designated program officer, please schedule that time now. You know, Vicky's on spring break this week. There's a lot of stuff going on between now and April 9th. If you try to call us on April 8th, we likely won't have a lot of time to discuss at length how you want to change your grant. So get those things set up now, and feel free to follow up. If there's things that you are looking for guidance on you haven't heard back from, don't be afraid to send that email again. You know, a couple days later. So give us a couple days to respond. It is a busy time right now with the grant continuations and renewals and VISTA stuff going on. So we are trying to get through everything, but if you guys do have any questions, feel free to reach out to your designated program officer. So this kind of wraps up our section of the FGP and SCP continuation grants. Again, this is pretty high level stuff, like higher level general overview things. as we look at stuff. So we do encourage you to look at the Managing Senior Corps website. Make sure you're reviewing your letters that got sent to you, the invitations to apply, as well as the grant application instructions that are out there. Those are going to be your resource tools. If you guys do need anything or something's going haywire with the application, make sure you're contacting the National Service Hotline and getting a ticket number, and making sure that that ticket number is on record for resolution. So again, we encourage folks to start early rather than later. But any final questions from folks, regarding the continuation applications that are due on April 9th? The lines are open, so if you muted your line, you can take us off mute by just pressing your mute button, or if you use *6, *6 will mute and unmute your line. So if you don't have a mute button and you push *6 to mute your line, *6 will unmute your line. In addition, you can also send us any questions on the conversation or the chat functionality in Skype. So the floor is open if anyone has any final questions. Dave, I turn it back to you to close us out.
All right. Well, thanks, Jancy, and thank you all for joining us for our call on this lovely Tuesday afternoon. We appreciate all the time and effort you all are putting into getting ready for your continuation applications. We look forward to reviewing them. Since we don't have any more questions, we'll go ahead and wrap up our call today. As a follow-up, we'll send out a copy of the slides and a link to the recording once we've got it posted so that you can share this with any colleagues or go back and look at it as you need to as you're preparing for submitting your application. And again, as you are working on those next steps, please don't hesitate to reach out to your program officer. Vicki, Jancy, and I are more than happy to be a resource in helping you navigate these next steps, and we appreciate all the work you do. So hope you have a great rest of your Tuesday afternoon, and I'm sure we'll be talking soon. Thanks for joining today, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.